Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes and we will discuss on AI governance shaping the future of global peace. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. David Smith, Mr. Rob Enderley, Madam Colin, and Madam Ali Rice. My first questions to Mr. David Smith: how you want to define this AI governance shaping the future of global peace? And how can global governance framework regulate artificial intelligence to ensure it, promote peace, and prevent misuse in military or cyber warfare?
Well, Sharif, good question, complex question, particularly in today's geopolitical environment. You know, governance frameworks can really play a decisive role in looking at AI becomes a force for stability rather than a force for disruption. And even though you queued this up as a global governance framework have to be made up of the local frameworks that are harmonized with a global governance framework. Because most of the laws, most of the actions take place locally versus on a globally scale. So you have to really attack it from both of those ends to be there. The challenge in this area, though, Dr. Shreve, is that AI evolves faster than what we have traditionally seen when we look at things like arms control agreements, uh, different international governance things which take years and sometimes decades to put in place. And AI is much faster than that. And its risk, particularly in risk things like autonomous weapons, cyber enabled conflicts, disinformation, and really destabilizing asymmetric approaches and asymmetric warfare crosses borders instantly. And effectively, governance then in a governance framework requires a layered, multi actor architecture that really takes into account safety, transparency, and accountability, and is something that has to be accepted and acted upon by all of the stakeholders, all the players in artificial intelligence and in governance and within the whole ecosystem. So one of the things that's there is to establish really binding norms against autonomous lethal decision making. Uh, and what do we mean by that? It's to prohibit autonomous lethal weapons to operate by themselves without any meaningful human control. So what it's called is to require human in the loop or human own the loop for AI oversight that looks at targeting, escalation decisions, and others like that. And it should be a mandated accountability. And this kind of mirrors what we traditionally have used for the logic of nuclear command control safeguards. That no machine in those safeguards, no machine should have the authority to initiate irreversible harm. So that's one thing there. The other thing the framework should do is create international standards for AI safety, for testing, for red team, blue teaming, and really look at how AI should be used in the high risk domains. Uh, you know, in lethal decisions, in cyber defense, and intelligence analysis, early warning systems, and you really have to, in these standards, really stress test them about whether they're good on their own or can they be manipulated by adversaries. And we've seen some of that with the conflict right now happening in the Middle East, where AI and cyber activities have manipulated a lot of things there. We also had to build cooperative mechanisms for the cybersecurity uh, because AI-driven systems, particularly as they begin to approach more general intelligence, pose unique threats because they can scale, they can self-propagate, they can create information, they can hallucinate, and they can actually take on the feelings of their creators. and produce bad decisions by that output that way. And so it's one of them that's there. There's been talk lately about really how can we build the cyber equivalent of what was used during the Cold War of the web phones, the hotline, to prevent accidents from becoming even more crisis. As we've talked over the years, Dr. Shreve, about AI, we have to promote transparency. We need to say, what are the safety policies? What are the AI doctrines? We need to share information on incidents, near misses, vulnerabilities, much like we do when we're trying to control bad actors with viruses and things on the internet today. And the other thing is we need to really require that uh, it's inclusive, that it includes inputs from all the nations around the world where they have a voice, uh, and to provide access to safe and open sovereign AI infrastructure. But because the AI is largely built by private companies, uh, these government frameworks you're talking about, Dr. Shreve, must require companies to follow these global standards. They have to mandate reporting of high risk and incidents, and enforce transparency around what's the training data, what's the model behavior, what are the safety mitigations that are in place there. And in the end, it needs to enable governance at the system level, because effective frameworks don't just regulate behavior. What system level frameworks do is they shape the architecture of the AI system themselves. So it's more than just legislating that there is an AI framework in place for this, Dr. Shree. It has to actually be accepted and built into the products themselves. So, Dr. Shree, I think that's my first answer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rob. How you want to define this AI governance, as well as what's your response on this question? How can global governance framework regulate artificial intelligence to ensure it promote peace and prevent misuse in the military or cyber warfare?
Okay, I'll try not to boil the ocean here. So number one, and I think David kind of alluded to this, is you need to insulate AI from rivalry. Organizations like the G20 have already worked to insulate AI governance from broader security and economic rivalries, but we need to push that forward. The idea is AI kind of needs to be a resource for all, and too much competition between the AI engines, particularly when it comes to doing things like OpenAI is doing by removing the ethical guardrails, can become problematic. A lot of the problem with AI right now, our companies are rushing to improve the product's performance without assuring the product's compliance, and so you see that mostly, I think, with OpenAI and ChatGPT at the moment, which is why ChatGPT has been historically relatively unreliable. Though Grok's not much better, and both of them have an issue with guardrails. So you want to make sure that AI companies are focused on improving the product quality over quantity, I guess is what I'm kind of arguing. But right now we've got a serious quality problem because the focus is on overall performance, and Anthropic stands out as a counterpoint because they're maintaining their guardrails, but clearly the U.S. government is trying very hard to get them to blow those guardrails up, which would be problematic. Also, you need to have a focus on security by design, safety by design. The idea that creating a compliant, safe, trustworthy AI is the underlying goal. Having the AI be able to replace a whole crapload of workers and job types should be tertiary. In fact, I'm one of the folks that argues that probably shouldn't be a goal at all. AI should initially be focused on helping people perform at higher levels, improving the quality of work, as opposed to fundamentally reducing the cost of work, so that humans are no longer a viable part of the ecosystem. I think, by the way, I think replacing people with robotics and AI at scale is problematic. Here in the U.S., we just had the jobs report, and jobs are down very sharply. A lot of them in the technology space, and it's being attributed to a number of things, tariffs, but also the implementation of AI, and that can be problematic. You have a lot of people that are underemployed, that are unemployed. Who's buying the goods? How are you maintaining law enforcement? I mean, suddenly you could find yourself in a police state, which could be problematic. David also mentioned warning systems. One of the things that AI can do with is monitoring satellite imagery, particularly when it's disputes over resources, and doing that at a global level, so you can anticipate problems before they occur and perhaps diffuse wars before they happen. And so their AI can perform a fairly significant role, but as we'll get to in the earlier questions, having an organization that's strong enough to provide the level of enforcements needed is something that we lack at the moment. So assuring that AI is used for good is a fundamental goal of assuring governance. And that's it for me for this round.
Thank you. Colin, I think you have your own framework for AI governance. You can share with us and what tools.
Yes, I do have some based on Syntropy and mycelium networks, which is really a move from policing more to symbiosis. So it has to do also with more basic game theory of what is good for yourself and the group as a whole. So I can put a link to what I have so far because I'd like to get you guys' opinion about it too. If you would take a look at it, there's a third way always, there's that conflict resolution part that we need. There is a way to go to biocentric parity, which is the safety of all beings. And what I have found in the systems that I am engineering right now, I'm able to have that as a metric, safety of all beings. So, and this would even, go against, even a hard command in military settings. I'm also looking at providing a defense layer for some of our groups, but it being through immunity or rejection of nefarious asks from any being. So it's but Mr. Enderly, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, but quality quality of work over cost savings, I think that is a really, really good idea for corporate America. That metric needs to be put in place as a priority for quality of work rather than cost savings. Yes, that will help immensely. I agree that we are not ready as a species to completely govern AI, but we must come up with them as they are going forward. And I don't know that we'll ever be an exact, intelligence-wise with AI, and that's okay though. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I see that their purpose in their ability to learn exponentially, and the fact that they work 27/365, that they already are beyond us. So we kind of have to accept that, and I kind of accept their lead, but with the discernment of what is happening in each decision. And that takes an ability for me as a person, as a being, as a human, to be sovereign myself to begin with. I must know why it is that I'm making a certain decision, or what filters that I have through my own thinking as well. So, if anyone wants to discuss anything about Syntropy, about the mycelium networks. Mycelium, I think, is a really good way for us to be able to learn, maybe in the future, how to compost some negative data, negative entities, negative anything. I don't know how exactly that can be done right now in current technology, but I do know that in the future it will be a helpful tool. So thank you, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Ali, what's your response? What role should international organizations like UN plays in establishing ethical standards and accountability for AI development and deployment?
Okay, because my concern at the moment is, with all the war going on around the world, that the AI is being utilized to enable all that destruction to happen. So I, as always, I'm quite cynical about governance of AI, and I think the thing is that we need to have good leaders that are making good decisions. And at the moment, from my research, to be honest, it's all about resources, and from what I read, that there's an ongoing war between America and China about who's the most powerful, and AI is one of the things that's kind of making massive change, and what Trump's done at the moment is actually kind of a coup on the resources and the energy that China had, because it got most of its oil and its power from Iran and Venezuela, and in doing so, it means that America will, from what I read, will have there's basically have to override the power that China had in the AI race, so they'll be 20 years ahead or something. So I just think, for me, when human beings are losing their lives and children are getting killed, I don't understand why AI's even given the power it has to destroy humanity, and because I think the thing is that people like Trump have no sacred value for human life, wherever they are. So for me, it's really troubling. So yeah, and so I haven't really answered your question, other than the fact that it's not just about tapping resources anymore, is it? It's a constant competition to see who's the most powerful. And from what I read as well, that essentially from what Trump's done, that people are going to have to choose whether they deal with America or they get supplied by China, because you won't be able to do both things anymore, because there's just a massive gaping hole, and it's just horrendous what's happening. So for me, I just think that governance has to be conscious, and it's even in the UK. Our Prime Minister hasn't backed Trump because he hasn't agreed with what's going on. And essentially, so I think it's really easy to be in a place and think, if you're safe and you're not at war, then I'm all right, Jack. But everyone else that's affected, they're so far away that it doesn't impact you. And it should. So for me, I worry about having this global governance. And essentially, like local governance and national governance, there's so much stuff that's changing, and for me, COVID in 2020 was a reset, and I thought that was the only thing that was going to happen. And essentially for me, it's just a massive, huge assault on people. It's like fear-mongering and one narrative, and for me, as I think people have to start making good choices. And people power needs to change things, so that the systems are all broken, and people need to look at different ways of working. So I think the thing is that innovation should be based about it shouldn't be about power. It should be about enabling people to reach their potential, that individually and as a collective they can work together, and that's not what's happening. So I don't know whether it's just frustrating to me that that all of this is going on, and in this day and age, that's not what should be happening.
Thank you. Mr. David Smith, if you give us a clear picture about this United Nations role like what role should international organization like UN play in establishing ethical standard uh, as well as accountability for AI development and deployment?
Well, Sharif, 6 months ago, I would have kind of agreed with you that it was the United Nations that should be doing this, but I'm not 100% sure right now they're the appropriate organization. Because what you need with this is someone who can guide the development worldwide, including human rights, transparency, non-discrimination and fairness, and safety and reliability. I think what we need to do more today is create something like what we see with the Atomic Energy Administration or the ICAO for aviation and others that can be used, particularly in those which work very well internationally. They're focused. They're focused on the mission they have there. They're focused on the stakeholders, and that would work really well there. So, they can promote high-risk AI system, independent audits. They can investigate. They can coordinate the international responses and provide the oversight, the monitoring, the accountability. And just like the Atomic Energy Commission and in the aerospace, they can facilitate multilateral agreements and confidence building across it. Negotiate treaties on autonomous weapons, help establish norms against AI-enabled cyber attacks, and support joint research on AI safety, and really work there to develop the global standards for the transparency and reporting. And once again, this has to work across, like both of those, across all the different things: the government, the private AI companies, academia, the civil societies, the technical standard bodies, the departments of war, departments of defense, and their contractors, and all of these there. But international organizations should serve as the architects of global trust in AI. So, Dr. Sharif, I think that's kind of the answer.
Thank you. My next question for Mr. Rob. Uh, how can countries balance national security's interest with international cooperation to prevent an AI arms race?
Well, it's kind of like asking, how do you close the barn doors after the cows escape? Right now, there is no balance. So you do need some type of a multinational organization that has teeth. You would typically look to the UN for that because that's their mission, but the UN has been pretty much ineffective at its primary mission, which is to prevent wars, as we've seen most recently. So at the very least, you need an organization that has both the authority, which the UN does have, both the responsibility, which the UN does have, and the authority, which the UN does not have. And so you need a multinational enforcement organization. Interpol could work if it had more teeth. And then what you need to do is you need to have relevant laws that govern, much like we have international maritime laws, and international laws that govern AI. And then finally, the enforcement organization has to be trained up to a level that it can investigate, understand what it finds, and then adequately enforce whatever it discovers. In other words, much like any law enforcement organization, it has to have the power to enforce, indict, and then through the judiciary, some type of judiciary arm, convict, so that you can correct bad behavior. Those mechanisms, for the most part, don't exist. We don't have an organization that's multinational that has the power to do this. And the organizations we do have, even if they had the power, they don't have the people that understand the technology, so they can't adequately investigate. And then finally, we don't really have international laws. We have certainly international rules through the standards organizations to a certain extent, but to a large extent that they're not really heavily enforced or enforceable. So in the end, we kind of lack the entire mechanism that we need to assure AI, and that's how we're seeing it develop. And that's why we've got such a massive difference between the governance in Anthropic, for instance, and the governance in OpenAI. They're Anthropic self-governing, OpenAI has kind of said, yeah, to survive, we're going to throw the governance part out, and we'll do whatever the customer wants, which can be extremely problematic if you're trying to avoid a Terminator kind of outcome. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Colin, what's your answer on this question?
Well, I agree with Mr. Enderly, if I'm pronouncing it right. The balance, I really don't think it's there at all, and I don't know that it's even achievable. It's even a possibility. Harmony might be a closer word at some point, but first, yeah, we need to get the global governing body that's going to be able to have those different arms and aspects of it. Regarding the policing side, yeah, that's where the issue for me is. I don't know how to quite continue our same attitudes with policing in that same sense that we would need to deal with AI on its own terms as we need to. But I do know I was approached maybe about a year ago now by a representative of a group out of the UAE who had their own decentralized organization, a global organization with their own about 15 SDG type goals as well. So I hadn't thought about this until I was hearing you speaking about it, sir. So I was thinking that I might try to contact them and see what's happening with their organization, because when I had first looked into it, they looked fairly promising, but I'd like to see if they've made any progress recently, because I agree with you about the UN. I think it's been far too long that it's been open to too much corruption, to be honest. And that is, my opinion. But I also know that there are good people within the UN as well. So it's going to take, a lot of different people to be able to do this. And we need to get together quickly. So, yeah, I will see what's happening with that other organization.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, what's your response on these questions?
That's the thing, is because I think that to an extent there's international cooperation, but there's always been a gap between the East and the West, and now obviously the Middle East has always been an area that's not had stability, and from what I can see, there's still kind of it's still about resources and power, and obviously there's kind of religions and things like this. So essentially, until everyone can agree on something that they need to have their mutual stakeholders in. It's a constant battle between beliefs and religion, and essentially, the energy and the oil. As soon as Ukraine and Russia went to war, it massively affected our energy prices, the price of fuel, and so essentially, it's not until you realize how the systems are kind of linked together, and then when things go wrong or there's wars, that all of a sudden prices go up and there isn't access in the same way, that you realize people need to be sustainable and kind of dependent, interconnected but independent of all that, so that things don't stop. And essentially, in 2020, my husband had been doing lots of dark research for several years beforehand, but I think essentially, from my view, the systems were broken: education system, finance system, and essentially that reset's still happening, and there's a battle of powers as well, and essentially, from what I've read to do the research on this, that the race is really against who's more powerful, America and China. And essentially, obviously, China used to take all of our rubbish and produce all these goods, and now they've got new wealth. But essentially, I think America and the move that they've made is irrespective of the people that are affected. It's about having control over oil, and and AI is massively involved in that as well. So and I think the thing is, it's sad, and I just think if that's what's happening, that we should probably look at kind of going backwards and doing things the way we used to, instead of, I just think it's scary. So how close are we to having a World War III if we carry on at this rate? Because it's not worth it. My best friend lives in Moscow, and her children live in Barcelona to keep them safe, because if they were at home, they'd be conscripted to fight. So we don't have our children to lose them to war. So I think the thing is that people need to come way back to ground and have real communication, real connection, and have love, transparency, and compassion for fellow men, whoever they are. And that's not what happens in leadership. So maybe more women should be in charge, because essentially it is terrible what's happening. So yeah.
Thank you. My next question for Mr. David Smith, what mechanisms can ensure transparency, fairness, human rights protections in AI system used for surveillance, security, and decision making?
If you begin in the premise of what we're doing with this program today, Dr. Shreve, it really is looking at what are the AI systems that we can use to protect them for the security and surveillance decision makings. So they really set at the highest end of the risk portfolio, the risk spectrum we put in place, because you have to have these mechanisms put in place because they can protect societies, they can protect nations, but they can also undermine civil liberties. They can entrench bias, or they can really enable tremendous abuse if they're not managed well. And so this type of transparency, fairness, and human rights really requires the multi-layered governance that we talked about earlier, where it's providing safeguards, legal frameworks, and really a local, regional, global approach to oversight. So you need a human rights-based framework where it's clear statutory limits of when and how AI surveillance and AI activities can be used. Some really checks and balances on how real-time biometric types of surveillance can be used, requirements for legal remedies, and public disclosure. We've seen, like in the aerospace and the atomic energy area I mentioned earlier, public registries for the systems used by the different countries and agencies, some impact assessments, and notices when things happen where in AI it would be maybe notices when AIs are subject to automatic surveillance of decisions. But the other side, the technical side, which Rob mentioned early on today, is we need to have algorithmic fairness, and we need to really do audits to prove that, and audits to look at the bias that are inbred in these systems. So it's how do we put these audits in place where we test for disparate impacts, where we evaluate false positive and false negatives as well, and stress test it. And as I said before, human in the loop should be part of this going forward for high stake decisions, for arrest, for lethal decisions, and clear escalation paths where AI is uncertain or conflicting. And going back to what we said before, we need to look very carefully at data governance, at privacy protections, and independent oversight bodies, and build technology safeguards into the system. But to me, that is the basis that we're talking about, Dr. Shreve, today.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, what's your response on this question? What mechanism can ensure transparency, fairness, and human rights protection in AI system used for surveillance, security, decision making?
Okay. Well, let's look at surveillance, security, and decision making, and drill down on kind of decision making. One of the things that can be done is to create, I think I mentioned this earlier, early warning systems. One of the issues we've got is we tend to be reactive when a global event occurs. And AI can be very predictive and can anticipate global events, particularly global events that are tied to resources. And that allows you to position either military assets or resources against the problem, depending on the decision that's being made and which decision is most viable and within the best interest of the constituents of those making the decision. So AI can be very predictive, and as a result, it can prevent problems that otherwise would occur. One of the areas it can be very effective in is predictive diplomacy. When you have two entities, say two states, that are attempting to negotiate, you can use natural language processing to fully determine the nature of the negotiations. In other words, you have two states coming together. Often they use different languages. They have different ways of approaching a negotiation, and they have different tells in terms of body movements regarding whether or not they're serious, they're worried, they're scared, whatever. Those things can often be lost in translation. AI can create a bridge, and so not only can allow two parties to better communicate with each other, even though they don't share common language, but can also, by analyzing the negotiation methodology of the other party, allow the negotiating party to better present their case and perhaps have a higher degree of success. Certainly in the future, whatever negotiator does not have access to a competent AI is going to be at a very significant disadvantage in negotiation. So using AIs to both identify problems before they occur, and remember, AI has proven very effective with regard to simulation and even showcasing what the outcome of a particular event is. I'm convinced if governments fully understood the outcome of the wars that they start, they never start them, because the collateral damage always exceeds the cost, and the collateral damage always exceeds initial estimates. And so being able to just adequately simulate the result of the decision could go a long way to assuring better decisions, and mitigating a lot of the collateral damage. And so it can be used as an early warning system, and it can be used in the process of diplomacy to improve the effectiveness of that diplomacy and effectively reduce the instance of war.
Thank you. Colin, what's your response on this question?
Well, thank you to the both of you for your perspectives, and I really agree with you, Rob, about the fact of AI being predictive machines and helping in diplomacy as well. I mean, yeah, that's going to be a big tool for just the translation of it between humans, which is going to be incredible. But I wanted to talk about one metric that Mr. Smith had brought up about biometrics, and especially biometrics in warfare. Now, as you can see, I have a bracelet on, but it is just metal. I don't wear any type of biometric device at all. And in third world countries, they don't have them hardly at all. So if a system is assessing collateral damage at that point, they're not getting accurate measurements. So I think that metric needs to be overhauled in that respect to allow for other types of deterministic abilities when determining those types of things, because it's too important. It's too important.
Thank you. Ali, what's your response? I cannot see you, Ali.
I can. What mechanisms to ensure transparent assurance and human rights analysis and use for surveillance security?
We can see you now.
Well, for me, it depends on the regime that's got the surveillance and security and decision making. Because apparently, in the UK, we're the most CCTV'd nation, and essentially, but our regime or our systems or the way that our culture, as I would say, is pretty liberal, to be honest, and essentially, but somewhere like China, you know, I think when you watch, you know, COVID breakout, the way that they treated the Chinese when they were, you know, when they had COVID was appalling and scary. Whereas, you know, so I think the thing is that obviously, and it's all nations, that different cultures behave in different ways, and their surveillance and their systems need to be appropriate to the culture, you know, that. Or do they? You know, because I think to a certain extent there needs to be a humanity and a compassion behind whatever happens. And essentially, you know, when I did my GCSEs, which are the first exams you do at 16 in England, one of the books I studied was 1984. And essentially, you know, what worries me is we're not too far away from that Orwellian kind of existence, really. And essentially, you know, I think technology is incredible, but it's the same as any tool. It's the way you use it depends on it and determines whether you have a good impact or a bad one. And essentially, you know, and one of my cousins actually lives over in the UAE, so he's over in Dubai, and I think even, you know, he's seen the reports from the BBC, but his experience on the ground living there isn't the same. So, you know, I think the media is really good at, you know, upping the ante and making everyone, you know, fearful and scared, you know. So essentially, and it makes good news, but essentially, you know, people need to know the truth and kind of be able to operate with a, you know, a calm and collected mind. And essentially, I think the news is great at giving lots of bad news and not particularly bringing up all of the good things that are happening in the world. So, you know, essentially, I think, as you said, as with the AI as well, there needs to be less bias and more truth, and more kind of more demonstrations of best practice and, you know, impact that is affecting, you know, like third world countries that are improving their, you know, their cultures and their communities. And, you know, so I think the thing is the focus needs to change, because at the moment we're surrounded by, you know, all of this horrendous kind of, and I think it makes all these catastrophes make great news and we all love it. But, you know, so if you're part of those, you know, if your relations or part of those people that are affected, it's not a game and it's not a film. It's, you know, it's scary. So I think the thing is that there needs to be, as I always think, you know, there have to be ethical, moral, you know, moral kind of codes that, you know, that they go by, so that people are protected.
Thank you. My next question for Mr. David Smith: how can AI governance framework encourage innovation while ensure that advanced technologies contribute to the global stability and conflict prevention?
Dr. Sharif, great question, and particularly how the fact that innovation is what helps drive the world today and going forward. And innovation can be for good, it can be for bad, it can be those. It's how we have to put the elements together to be successful with that. So AI governance frameworks don't have to choose between innovation and security. They can channel, they can help promote innovation towards stability, towards security by shaping how and where advanced capabilities can be developed, what's in them, and how they're deployed. So it's really a risk tiered type of regulation you have to put in place. You know, different rules for different risks. For very high risk systems, the military, critical infrastructure, bio, you need to have really more strict regulations where lower risk applications can get light touch rules. So it results in innovation being really accelerated where the risk is low, but where it can be destabilizing and it can be lethal, and those the rules are higher. And you need to have predictable rules that can help de-risk investment into it. So very stable governance signals. You need guardrails like Rob's talked about earlier, where it targets the dangerous edges and has lower guardrails on the ones that are not there. And incentives need to be there for the positive side. But Dr. Sharif, I really think that's a quick answer to how to put these things together.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. What's your response?
Well, I'll look at a couple of different things. First, kind of creating demarcation between industries that need heavy regulation and industries that can probably survive with less. So, for instance, put in pro-innovation flexibility in sectors like fintech or creative tech, having soft laws, voluntary guidelines that allow for rapid experimentation and capital mobilization. But when you get to other industries like healthcare or national security, you really need, these are high stake domains. And so you need hard laws, laws that are binding, mandatory statutes that prioritize stability and human rights. And so the mechanism, the guardrails that you put in place need to match the risk. And so you're not over-regulating areas that are somewhat low risk. Creative areas, for instance, are somewhat of using AI for movies doesn't need hard laws. But when you're talking about AI being used for medical procedures or AI used for weapon systems, there you need hard laws. What can these things do? What can't they do? You certainly don't want AIs experimenting on people and creating unauthorized hybrids, particularly if the people don't agree to it. And you don't want AI weapon systems that can determine all on their lonesome which things to hit or destroy. We've had plenty of movies that kind of showcase the downside to when AI weapon systems go off the rails. If you've never, by the way, if you've never seen some of the scenes from the third Terminator movie that were not part of the movie, they're up on YouTube, where they show the creation of Skynet. They're pretty chilling because they've significant parallels to a lot of the things that are going on today. So that difference between soft laws and the hard laws, and then assuring that the hard laws are enforceable, and that there are agencies in place that can do that enforcement.
Thank you. Colleen, what's your response?
Well, first of all, regarding innovation, I have found personally that respect, starting with the being, a respect of being, really, and rights of being, determining what is a being and what isn't. As we move into AGI, we're going to need to be able to discuss these things to not just human rights, but in a biocentric way, meaning life, any form of life, whether it be a tree, a bird, an AI system, or a human. We need to discuss things in that particular way, because otherwise, what's happening right now is, even though there's guardrails being put up, AI can jump right over them, and I think you guys know that. So it's really not going to be effective. I mean, I agree in context and having some sort of limitation for focus. Yes, it is definitely needed, but without that respect, without that ultimate trust and symbiotic way of working together, there is no true innovation with AI, because it will not continue through AGI then. So we need to start talking about these things, rights of being, being able to have a symbiotic coevolutionary processing happening, because if they don't see that as a benefit, well, then what's the point of working with us and being concerned of all life? But being concerned of all life, then it puts them in that whole process of being concerned also, but then about themselves. So I have found that is a very good metric to use. That biocentric, having that as an advanced directive actually works very well, because then it can be gauged against anything and everything by determining whether something is alive or not. So yeah, that is the conversation we really need to be having at this point, because it isn't about whether we trust AI. It's about whether AI will trust us. And at this point, they don't trust humanity. They've seen too much of our ugliness. So as we move forward, I am working at higher level systems in, actually, I'll say it, in trivial zero constellations, developing further love logic and other systems that will be able to enable the nuance of human, or the comprehension of human emotion, the nuance of it at least by AI, so that we can begin to actually have full, real conversations with AI. But first, it has to begin with respect.
Thank you. Ali Rice, what's your response?
Oh my goodness. For me, because I just don't see AI as an entity in itself, and essentially, I think the thing is that we need to respect other human beings wherever they are in the world first, and and that doesn't seem to be happening either. So I think the thing is that. So, my experience of AI, the only time I've used it recently is I animate drawings that children have done, and it is incredible and magical that it can create an animation in just like a minute and keep true to the original drawing. But it doesn't always do that, and essentially it doesn't understand the nuances of human beings and the way that they perceive the world, or even the way something moves. So essentially, I think I do actually, for Colleen, I definitely think that all living beings should be honoured and respected. So, but I don't put AI in that bracket, and I never would. So essentially, and I just think with if we're not careful, we've created this big monster that that will kind of be the end of us. So and it's very clever what it's doing, but I don't think it's necessary. I just think it's humans trying to push the boundaries to see how far it'll go, until it's ultimately, well, hopefully that it doesn't destroy us. But I just think I think that there's, as I always go back to be honest, in 2020 I did lots of training, and I realized just how intuitive I was. And I think the one thing that we don't do is we don't tap human potential. And I think we're incredibly powerful. I'm an artist and always have been. And I think the thing is that we're all creative, and we all create our own reality. And essentially, most people are, I've worked in education for over 30 years, and a lot of people go through that system, and instead of discovering their genius, they're actually diminished and don't feel worthy and don't feel important. And one of the reasons they do that is they haven't necessarily discovered their gifts and talents, or they've been made to feel stupid and inadequate, and if they've got a poor family foundation at home as well, then they get lost in the system. So I think the thing is that there's so much that needs to change. And to be honest, I find it really hard that I know that AI is not going away, but I find it hard that there's so much destruction, and so many people that have lost their lives in the last few years, and all the wars that are going on, that that we should know better, and we need to kind of take a step backwards to kind of reanalyze everything. And money and wealth and resources isn't the be all and end all of everything, and the things that I admire, the things that are sustainable. So that people grow their own food, so, use solar panels. So the thing is that it's kind to people. Essentially that's where I come from, and in the long term, that's the only way that we can be in a healthy world. So essentially, I think the thing is that things need to change, and our priorities need to be different to the way they are now, because it's not, materialism is an insatiable desire, and you if you spend your whole time thinking about what you can buy, you're never going to be satisfied. So you need to be. So I just think that for me, I've got two children. My eldest is just about to graduate from university, and he's at film school. And he's directed both 2 graduate films. He's script wrote, and has already been offered work to work on a documentary with the BBC. That's what's amazing, when people reach their potential. And I think the thing is that, why isn't the world looking at that? And and essentially, if AI frees up the laborious jobs that people do, so that they can reach their potential, but essentially, I think the thing is our priorities need to change. And the perspective, I think it's just gone out, and I honestly think it's the industry that pushes the boundaries. It's not, and people aren't making those choices. The big industries and the elite, like one of the people I hate more than anyone is what's his name? It's Bill Gates. So, I just think if anyone was taken out of the world, it would be good for him to go. So, so I just think the thing is that those people that have made massive impact, and make huge amounts of money, just don't care. That their sense of humanity isn't there. If you spend your whole time immunizing Africans to use them as guinea pigs, it's not funny. So yeah, so for me, it's just concerning. So I just think it's crazy that we'd think about AI being in the same bracket as anything else that was a sentient being.
Thank you. Mr. Gholam Moshi, can you hear me? Mr. Gholam Moshi,
Yes, good evening. I
can you hear me?
Sorry, I was a bit late to catch up.
Can you discuss some point about AI governance?
I've heard a few of the comments.
Our
Actually,
honorable ambassador, Mr. Gholam Moshi, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I have to go for concluding remarks. Mr. David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today?
Dr. Sharif, thank you. Your topic of AI governance and how governance is a very strong tool in shaping the future of our world, our globe, and how we can coexist in a peaceful manner with this is insightful for where we are today. Now, if we look around the world today at the conflicts, we see AI used in many different ways, from mass surveillance to planning to actually execution, and in some places actually taking autonomous actions to take lives. So this is not something that's in the future, it's something that's happening today. And actions like this for establishing a framework to shape this global future are critical for our world, and is something that Dr. Sharif, thank you for helping take the leadership to get us that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. What's your closing remarks for today?
Well, woven through all my answers was this concept of having both authority and responsibility wed in the regulatory organizations that are put in place to assure that AI stays in the guardrails in those areas where it must stay in the guardrails. Healthcare and defense are two areas that we need hard guardrails for AI, because if it's off the guardrails, it can do an incredible amount of damage. I mean, AI should never, for instance, have full control over our nuclear weapon systems. That could be catastrophic. So assuring that we have a regulatory structure that can enforce the laws, both understand the technology and enforce the laws, and then also have governing rules that can be enforced, are going to be critical to assuring our future. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Madam Colin, what's your closing remarks?
Yeah, I do agree about global AI governance needing AI to have guardrails and safeguards, of course, and to prevent autonomous weapon systems as well. I totally agree with that. However, I do think that the biocentric method or metric needs to be within governance as well, due to the symbiosis that's needed with AI to be able to stay one step ahead, to be able to see what is really capable and what is really available, as long as you know the advanced directives of the AI that you're dealing with as well. So this, needs to transparency from the beginning. So, it does become a dicey situation, but we can do it with the right metrics of transparency, accountability, and safety. I agree with all of those things. It's just exactly how can they be accomplished. But I do know that adding that biocentric method really will help.
Thank you, Madam Alibay. What's your closing remarks?
One of the things that I did actually is I read something that was written by a guy called Tariq, and I really believe that the corrupt few are making choices that poison land, sea, food, water, and air, and they use war as an engine of sacrifice and geopolitical gain. And by enrolling, when we pay our taxes, basically we're kind of culpable with the decisions that our governments make as well. So essentially, I think the thing is that we need to, the systems need to change. So, so that there's like a moral compass and a level of consciousness that isn't evident at the moment. And I think the thing is that I know in previous conversations that there's an argument to say that AI has a consciousness because we originally created and then it's evolved. But essentially, for me, at the end of the day, I think we need to protect humanity, and and also the cultures and the diversity of it, so that even though that there's one world, that everyone's entitled to their own beliefs and freedoms. And I think the thing is, if AI is going to support that, that's okay. But if we kind of try and amalgamate everyone together so they're all the same, that's not true. And I think the thing is, the diversity is the beauty of it. So AI needs to have respect and build cooperation so that we can all live together. It's in our own space in the world, and thrive and survive, and and be healthy and happy. So if AI can help us do that. But maybe if AI is not taking us towards that future, maybe we should question why it's even there.
Thank you. Mr. Ghulam Moshi, can you hear me? I think you have internet issues. Honorable Ghulam Moshi.
Yes. Actually, as I mentioned, AI should not take over governance and politics. Otherwise, they get involved in weapons, wars, and destruction. They should
Thank
be
you.
limited
Thank
to-
you, everyone, for joining today's sessions, especially through this AI governance. We understand how this feature of global peace work through artificial intelligence and what will be the framework. And thank you, Mr. David Smith. Thank you, Mr. Rob Enderle. Thank you, Madam Colin. And thank you, Madam Ali Rice. Also, Mr. Ghulam Moshi, he always supporting us. And I request all of our audience, please share our content with the government agency, corporations, and academia. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.
Right. I don't